part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
All right, before we get to the show, just have a couple disclaimers to make. One, like an hour before we recorded this with John, found out that my wife and I tested positive for COVID. So that sucked. We're doing okay. But also I found out that as I was recording, somehow the audio source got messed up and you're hearing my computer audio. And there's nothing that I hate worse than crappy audio. So I apologize in advance. And usually I don't preface my work. And I've been racking my brain how to resolve this. And it is what it is. And at this point, I just want to get this out because it's an incredible episode. I love talking to John. We could have talked for another hour. This is one of the longest episodes I've recorded in a long time. But I just wanted you to know right out of the jump that the audio is on my end. John sounds crystal as he should, and everyone else in the podcast network does. It's just mine for some reason didn't record using my interface, and I don't know why. So with that said, here is my interview with John Sabol, just an incredible guy, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. We talk a lot about his roots into media. We talk about the Cavs. We talk about the Browns. We talk about Stefanski. We talk about Baker. And I share the biggest issue I feel like is plaguing the Cleveland Browns right now. I don't want to give it away, but it's not Stefanski or Baker. It's not either of those. So check it out. That's after the break. And I'm looking to hopefully release an episode here on the Chase Smith podcast 3 to 4 times a month. So excited to get this thing back up and running. Thank you for downloading, and I hope you enjoy half crappy audio on my end and this incredible interview with John Sabol. Thank you for downloading the Chase Smith podcast, proudly part of the Press Play Podcast Network. In this episode, I interview John Sabol. We discussed his new job with Fox News 8, the Browns' Week 17 loss to the Steelers, the Cavs, and much more. Let's get it!
Here was someone that I got to meet last summer and quickly became one of my good friends. This incredible dude that if you don't know him now, you will know him very soon. John Sabol, what's good, brother? Can I call you a brother, even though I'm not part of like the Sabol brother brand? Is that okay?
Absolutely. Anybody could be a brother. Thanks for having me on, Chase. It's been it's crazy the fact that you and I got to meet over the summer, and then it feels like we've known each other longer than like 7 months.
It does. So John, let me just give everyone a quick history on John Sabol, and then we'll fill in the blanks, man, because it's just you're living a lot of people's dream, and you're probably living your dream, which is really cool. So John grew up in Cleveland, huge sports fan, and you going into media, and you worked in the great state of West Virginia, where I was born and raised.
Yeah. I remember when I told you that, man. I remember on that Zoom call, your eyes just lit up just like they are right now. For our listeners out there, Jason and I are on a Zoom call, and man, yeah, it's crazy. So I grew up in Cleveland, suburb in Hudson. Everyone's like, oh, you east, west side. I'm like, no, I'm more south, because, Hudson was more of a suburb of Akron than it was Hudson, or than it was Cleveland. But, grew up in Cleveland, big Cleveland sports fan, and went to school at Kent State, and, grew up a huge Ohio State fan, still an Ohio State fan, obviously. And, youngest of 5, people that listen to this podcast, may recognize my name from what you were just saying, the Sabol brothers, my brother Scott.
Yeah, well, I haven't even gotten there yet. We're just.
I know. Yeah, we'll
accelerated to last summer.
Yeah, and so we, young kid growing up in Cleveland's brother, big influence into sports and in TV. Got into television, worked in West Virginia, and went to Florida, and now I'm coming up to Cleveland. So that's kind of the quick Cliff Notes version. I can go in more detail, but it's been a long road back to Cleveland for me. I have not lived in Ohio, Chase, and this is going to be surprising to you probably, but I have not lived in Ohio since 2009.
Yeah, well, that's what I want to talk about, because we've talked off potting, right? Just in our phone calls, which would be great episodes, by the way. And
they would be.
I want to get some of those stories on this pod tonight, man. And so I want to talk about that. So yeah, you grew up in Ohio, Ohio State fan. At Kent State, you majored in journalism.
Yep. Broadcast journalism was my major. And, at the time when I graduated high school in 2004, all the guidance counselors and college recruiters were saying, if you want to get a job in television, you need a degree in journalism. So, at the time, I'm like, oh man,
DeVry was huge in like 04, 05. It felt like everyone like got something from DeVry University.
Yeah, and it's like then they're like, oh, you need to do something similar or go to accredited school, whatever. So, I had a lot of different options to go to, and like Kent State was right down the road from my house, and I never really wanted to go there. My dream was Ohio State, and at the time they didn't, and I don't know if they still do, if they do now or not, but they didn't have an accredited journalism program. So I'm like, you know what? If people are saying people in TV wouldn't accept people without accredited journalism program, then I'll skip my dream of going to Ohio State. I'll go to Kent State, which was awesome too. Yeah, great journalism school.
When I was looking at journalism schools, I was drawn to Ohio University. Even OU has a little more established school.
Yeah. OU has a more rich history in journalism dating back far years and decades before Kent State got on the map. And for a long time, OU was big for print journalism, and then they switched into TV. And I could have gone to OU, Chase, but the reason why I picked Kent State over Ohio University was one simple reason, and it was this. I wanted to get into television right away, meaning my first fall semester, I wanted to be in front of the camera. OU didn't let you do that. You needed to do a bunch of different,
I think it was 2 years at least.
2 years. Yeah. Kent State, they're like, no, you can start right away. Yeah. So you didn't need to be in the journalism program to start right away in their TV2 Kent State student run television, basically an extracurricular club, if you will. You could do it right away. And so I did. And it was the best decision for my career and for my life at the time. I loved it. Even though I lived like 15, 20 minutes away, I still lived on campus and had a lot of good times there with buddies and things. And I grew so much as a journalism major and in the career. We had kids that transferred from OU as graduate students that credits at the time did not transfer properly because the TV program had accelerated so much, where OU's at the time was still a little behind. Yeah. Which is weird because they had been established for years and decades. And so they had to take some entry level elective classes in the journalism field before they could get into the big weighted upper classmen classes, if you will. Nothing to take away from OU, because I know a lot of my buddies still went there and everything like that. And it's still a phenomenal school.
Incredible. Yeah.
For me, it's like, I wanted to get involved right away. And I did that at TV2, doing sports as a sports anchor, and got to learn a lot, and did that all 4 years there. And man, I had some great teachers along the way. Some have since passed away. And I wouldn't be here without them. One of my college professors, any of my TV2 fellow students and alums that are working in Cleveland, because there are a ton of Kent State graduates in the Cleveland market. Any of them listening to this will know the name Gary Hansen. Gary Hansen was a long tenured Kent State journalism staff teacher there in the TV field. And he was a former television news director, and he passed away a few years ago. And he was a guy that devoted his entire life to the school and to kids and to the TV2 program. And for us as students, like, you go in his class and it wasn't like you're in class. Like, you felt like you're at work, but you felt like you had like not just a teacher, but like a father figure there. He wanted every kid there individually to succeed. And I know a lot of my fellows, fellow classmates that are still in TV, and some that have gone to different fields since then, owe a lot to their career to Gary Hansen. And he was a great guy, and that was a teacher of mine at Kent State that I truly learned a lot from. And I had more than just one class. I had like 3 or 4 from him. And without him, I don't know if I would be in the position I am today.
Was there anyone growing up, John, that kind of started your dreams of being on air and being in news? Like, were there any broadcasters or journalists that maybe it was a family member? I don't know. Like, what started this drive to be an anchor man?
It's funny you say that, because I've had this question asked to me, Chase, probably, I don't know, thousands of times in my life since I got into TV, or even before that. Because in high school, my senior year, we had a broadcast journalism class you could take where we could just do play-by-play of like the high school games, or you could have your own sports talk show. And I did that. But it's funny growing up in Cleveland and having an older brother. I'm the youngest of 5. So it's my older brother, Scott, which we'll get into here in a bit. Yeah. And then I have 3 sisters and then me. So I was the baby of the family, and I got involved, and I was surrounded and, engulfed in era of non-90s, if you will. You and I grew up in the 90s. So like I have the 90s base of a lot of like pop culture and society, video games, TV shows, whatever.
90s.
Yeah. Right. And a lot of sportsy stuff too. But I also have like an 80s backing to it too, because of reruns that are on the TV that like maybe if you didn't ever notice it on TV because you weren't around or you weren't watching it, you didn't have someone to guide you there. So like that was my brother. Okay. So my brother, I got engulfed in like 80s culture too. So I had like Transformers, G.I. Joe, Knight Rider, Dukes of Hazzard, A-Team, things like that. Now I know I'm not answering your question about sports, but there's a reason why I bring this up, because the fact that my brother brought me in to like a era of culture at such a young age that was before I was born, or even maybe when I was born, brings me to how I got into TV or how I looked up to anybody in TV. And it was this. So while my brother did a lot of that for me, there was also a time when we would watch sports or listen to sports at home that I listened to more about the game, not about the X's and O's, about who was broadcasting it. So my brother and my dad were big on educating me on broadcasters in Cleveland, similar to how my brother tried to educate me on 80s pop culture a little bit inadvertently. So growing up in Hudson, we were about 15 minutes away from the old Richfield Coliseum, my favorite sports venue of all time. We would go to Cavs games there. Man, so many times a year. I don't even know how many times. I still have the ticket stubs at my parents' house in a drawer. I think I may have gone down on average, maybe 5 to 8 games a year, but that's still pretty decent amount if you think about it.
Yep. And
we would go there all the time when I was little. I remember what the concourse looked like. I knew more about the Coliseum than I knew more about some of my family members, Yeah. So I would go to games. There was one particular game. It was in 1992. My brother and I, at the end of the game, I forget who they were.
You're 6, 7 years old.
6 or 7 years old. Yeah. At the end of the game, my brother decided, he's like, let's go find Joe Tate. Joe Tate, legendary Cavaliers broadcaster, passed away this past year.
Yeah.
So Joe Tate at the Q, or Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, now has the little perch in the first row of the second deck of the arena, where they now have the radio booth. He had that similar at the Coliseum, but his was a little more intimate, meaning like your row right behind him there was legit fans. So the game ended. My brother and I walked up to the next level and we sat behind him. Joe Tate was one of the last remaining broadcasters, not just in the NBA, but in the entire realm of sports, to do everything himself for years. Play-by-play in color. He was the one-man band. We sat behind him. The game had ended. We sat behind him, and I'm like 5 feet away from this guy, and there's no security. And it's my brother, Joe Tate, and his on-site producer. And we're listening to him call. Actually, it was like the last 2 minutes of the game. We listened to the last couple minutes of the game, but then we sat there the rest of the game, the rest of the post-game show, and he's doing the entire post-game show, reading off stats. I was engulfed. I thought this guy was the coolest thing ever. I was so amazed. He gets done. He takes the headset off. He turns over to me, and my brother introduces us to me and himself. And Joe Tate is like the nicest guy. He's like your grandfather. And I don't really remember much of the conversation because, like you said, I was 6 or 7 years old. But ever since that moment, I knew broadcasting at some realm would be in my future. And then from that moment on, I always would listen to Cavs games on the radio in my room. We had one cable TV in my house growing up, and being the youngest of 5, Chase, I didn't get to say on anything.
And my dad, probably the remote control. You probably had to go change the channel because you were the youngest.
Exactly right. But being the youngest of 5, and my dad and my brother being outmanned by 3 sisters and my mom, they got to say on the TV. So I would sit in my room listening to Cavs games on the radio, on my alarm clock radio. it sounds something like, something out of the 1950s, listening to Indians game or baseball games. Right. And so, that moment on, like I would just listen to him, and then I would listen to games differently. I would watch baseball, football games. I'd watch the local news in a different form. I would watch it not just for sports, but I'd look at the person delivering the news, whether it's a news anchor or a sports anchor. So I got drawn into Joe Tate. I got drawn into Tom Hamilton and Herb Score with the Indians. I got drawn into the late Casey Coleman with the Browns. John Tellage at Fox 8, who will be retiring here the day before I start at Fox 8. We'll get to that in a second. Yeah. He was a guy I grew up watching. He was a mentor of mine. I was his intern years later. Those handful of guys were the ones that really drew me into broadcasting. And I'm like, you know what? I love what you're doing. I know it's all different, play-by-play, sports anchor, whatever, but I want to do it. So it's kind of a long story, but there's a reason how I got wrapped into all of that. And that's how it is.
I love it. And it's also a plus to have Jim Nantz in your back pocket too, man. That's always a good start.
Yeah. For those who haven't heard, our podcast, Sabol Brothers on the Baseline, we had Jim Nantz on, and real quick, I knew Jim when I worked in West Virginia, your old stomping grounds. When I worked in Beckley, West Virginia, Jim Nantz was
I'm Parkersburg, but yeah.
You're more north.
Yeah.
But I was in Beckley, more south, and he was, covering we were covering the Greenbrier Classic, a PGA tournament there. And I was working for the CBS affiliate there in Beckley. And, I got to meet him in at the PGA tournament there, got to interview him, got to talk to him and everything. And we became close friends, have always constantly communicated. We had him on the podcast a couple months ago on our podcast, and he was just amazing. A good dude, classy as they come, great Browns talk. But he's another guy too, as I got older, Chase, that I really looked up to in a lot of ways with his talents and with what he does.
It's an incredible episode. I'll post a link in the show notes. People can go check that out. It is so fun to listen. Some of the stories that he shares, just you can hear his heart and hear his care for you, and it's just really, really cool. It was cool to listen to, man. It was great.
I appreciate that.
My kind of journey into media, I always loved on Sunday at NBA on NBC, Sunday afternoons. I probably broke over 10 laundry baskets that I would set on our couch with a basketball. And as the Bulls would play the Pacers or the Knicks or someone, I would just shoot the ball in our basement into this laundry. I got in so much trouble. I just break these laundry baskets, but then I would mimic what Marv Albert says or whoever the announcer is. I just would call my own basement basketball game. And then as the video camera kind of turned into more handheld personal camera, being able to edit videos and tell stories that way. And it was just something that I was always drawn to. And I went to Marshall University for a year, and my major there was broadcast journalism. I was in the broadcast school for a year before I transferred to a Bible college. But I absolutely loved it. And just even the connections I made at Marshall for a year was there is this weird reality where if I didn't transfer from Marshall and stayed there, John, my life would be completely different, because I'm so grateful for my life now because of the ministry that I've been able to work with and my family. I met Leslie at the Bible college, but I don't think my parents or anyone who knows me or knew me in high school was surprised that I'm doing podcasting and podcast network. We moved to Chicago 7-8 years ago, and I took writing classes at Second City. All of this kind of writing, SNL, improv, some type of creative outlet, whether it's creating some video story or writing a sketch or doing some audio platform. To me, it all kind of fits in the same part of my brain, and just absolutely love it. And I also love sports, which makes just a ton of fun because content always always there. And getting to know people like you, man, is the best. So you graduate, end up at a CBS affiliate in West Virginia, and you find yourself in Tampa. Is that how that works? Or
So
West Virginia?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2008, and then if everyone knows what happened, the next year was the Great Recession and the economy crashed. So it took me 15 months actually to find my first TV job. So I those 15 months was living at home and working for a buddy's dad, and did that for 15 months, just trying to like send my tapes out. Well, it really wasn't tapes; it was more your DVD, and then it switched to your link to your reel and stuff. And no one was hiring because the recession had just killed jobs. And so I got the job at the WVNS, the CBS 59 News in Beckley, West Virginia, worked there for 2 years. Then I went to Charleston, West Virginia, an hour up the road, and worked at the CBS affiliate there, doing sports as well. That was WOWK Channel 13. Worked there for almost 2 years. Got hired there as a weekend anchor, a weekend news or sports anchor, and then got promoted to the sports director position. And then left there in 2013 for a job in Tampa here in October of 2013. And this job that I had was a different role. It wasn't just sports, it was news. So I worked the job, how it was offered to me was, okay, you're going to be our sports reporter for 3 days during the week. And then you're going to sports anchor the weekends. And then you're also going to anchor news on the weekends, but you're also going to produce your content during the week and on the weekends. So I was like, okay, so what? Like, it's such a foreign job. So really I was doing like 4 or 5 jobs in one. So I'd come into work on the weekends in Tampa, had to produce 5 minutes of content. 5. That's a lot of time in television. If you think about it, you have a half-hour show, 19, 20 minutes of those is content-ish. The rest are commercials. And actually, sometimes it's even less than that, depending on how the breaks are set up. So really, you're looking at maybe 16, 17 minutes of content, 5 of which are sports. On top of that, you got to come up with the content, produce it, write it, edit it. And then you got to read an entire news show, and you got to do all of it. So it's like you operated that job. I operated that job as working on adrenaline, time management. And it just, you're getting so wired, man. Like, it's like after you're done the 11 o'clock news, I felt like I drank 4 pots of coffee because your adrenaline's like, so a lot of times I'd come home and go work out, I'd lift or something, because you're just so pumped. But so I did that. And then, during the week, you just go to practices, you work on feature stories. For me, I covered the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Tampa Bay Rays. USF is down here. And just doing features. And then there's a lot of things here, spring training, PGA, NASCAR, stuff like that. And did that for 7 years. And then had an opportunity to leave for a different job. And then COVID happened and my job went away. And it was a trying time for me to do that, to deal with that. So it wasn't fun because I left a job that I love, but also I knew I had opportunities elsewhere, and that went away with COVID. And so, but I was doing some other stuff on the side, some freelance things, and obviously working with you guys at Press Play has been awesome too. And then working, and then getting the opportunity that I have now, that I will be starting here in about a month, back in Cleveland.
Which and I probably should have mentioned this at the jump in my intro to you. You host the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast with us here on Press Play, but you also were just hired on at Fox News 8 in Cleveland. What's your official title there? It's more than just a sports correspondent, right?
Right. It's actually similar to the job I had here in Tampa, but I'm not doing news. So it's a weekday sports reporter and weekend sports anchor. So I'll be doing 100% sports and, covering the teams I grew up rooting for and still root for and grew up watching and still watch. So I'll be doing that. And it's funny too, because I interned there in 2007, my junior year in college. So I knew a lot of people there that are still there. And so it was like a home away from home. My brother works there too, but when I interned there, I never really saw him because he was on the morning shift. But it's a station that my brother has been with since 2003. It's a station that we both, as brothers and my family, grew up watching. We were little, we'd always watch it. Like I knew all the sports guys there since I can remember. Casey Coleman, who passed away a few years ago, who was the voice of the Browns for a few years before they moved to Baltimore. Dan Coughlin, who still helps out on Friday Night Touchdown, the high school football show. John Telledge, who's going to be retiring here in a month, who has been a great mentor for me. Tony Rizzo, who's now a sports radio host in Cleveland. And then Mark Schrader was a sports anchor there too, who's not in the business anymore. But I grew up watching those guys as well as the other news people too.
And joining you, King Carmen and Andre Knott.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one more.
Yeah, PJ Ziegler.
That's right.
PJ Ziegler. He's the weekday evening sports anchor. PJ and I here's a crazy tie. When I worked in Beckley, he worked in Beckley. I worked at CBS. He worked at NBC. So we were not rivals, but we were covering the same things. We became really good friends. Former Fox 8 intern, former Kent State grad, and a Cleveland native too. So it all came together for us. Love
it, man. Love it. So that also means you're moving back to Ohio because currently you're in Tampa.
Yep.
So
it's still in Tampa.
Couple months for the Sabol family, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's my last Christmas here. It was just my last Christmas here in Tampa, and my parents came down, and we'll be moving up there in a few weeks. And it's weird to think that, like a place I've called home here now 8 years.
Yeah.
Is now not going to be my home anymore. But
the family down there.
Leaving. My wife has her in-laws are snowbirds, and we've got a sister-in-law lives down here. But man, it's a great area. I'll miss it. It's treated me well. Love covering the teams here. Love my old job. But it's good. It can be good to get back home, and people are like, "You're crazy. You're going back to Ohio. It's gonna be cold. Are you snow?" Blah. I'm like, man, I miss it. Like, it's weird. Like, I miss it. My brother is like giving me crap too. He's like, John, like, you don't realize what you're getting yourself into. And I'm like, listen, when you've dealt with constant hurricane threat and heat and humidity from late April to about Thanksgiving, you're ready for some cold air. At least I am. I know I'm still in the minority and all that, but yeah, the heat and humidity takes its toll a little bit, but it's still an amazing place to live.
Yeah, I think I'd be more in your camp of I'm ready for real Midwest weather that's not like Florida man crazy. Well, hey, loved the little bio there, man. Let's take a quick break, come back, and dude, there's a lot we have to talk about. Browns, Cavs, but mainly just a lot of Browns. So we're gonna take a quick break. John, stick around, and we'll be right back.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. Listen, it is beyond time for you to join a book club. I know you've been thinking about it, and everyone's doing it. Here's how Books with Brooks works. We read one book a month, and then we talk about it. Classics like Stephen King's The Shining, debut novels like We Are the Brennans by Tracy Lang, and tons of other compelling, life-changing stories, one book and 1 month at a time. So come read along with us and then listen in.
Hey everyone, it's JD from the Hyman Podcast. Backed by popular demand, I'm excited to let you know that new episodes of the Hyman Podcast will drop every other Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're going to continue the conversations we started last season and keep having those hard conversations. There is so much in store for you this season, and I'm excited to share it with you. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single moment. The Hyman Podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
The R&R Podcast going to be rocking and rolling with you because football season is underway. College, Ohio State, the Power Fives, the MAC, the Browns. Michael Regai, are you ready to rock and roll with some football?
Kenny, I've been ready. This is our time of year. This is what R&R is all about. We're going to be with you every week. Kenny just said it. Browns, NFL, Ohio State centric. So you got to stay with us all fall and winter long here on R&R.
That's right. The Regai and Rhoda podcast coming to you here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe now and don't miss a show.
Looking for new insights on the Cleveland sports scene with a unique side of Cleveland sports history? Then you found the perfect podcast. I'm John Sabol.
And I'm Scott Sabol, and we're hosts of the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast, a podcast about Cleveland sports, but not your typical podcast about the land's sports teams. Join us as we embark on a journey of sharing a unique and historical side of Cleveland sports history with the help of some former Cleveland sports stars and other historical figures.
All right here on the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
All right, back with John Sabol here, host of the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline. He is your new Fox 8 sports anchor. I think that's the right title. We just talked about it, and I didn't write it down. Sorry, I was too busy just listening. But hey, let's talk about the Browns, because we just lost to the Steelers last night, Monday Night Football. It was an ugly game, and everyone has something to say. And almost everyone has a podcast. Not quite everyone yet, but John, we have podcasts, and so we're going to take some time to talk about that. I want to start with this. I think the biggest issue with the Browns right now, I don't think it's our quarterback. I don't think it's our wide receivers. I don't think, even though I was all alone, the lone voice in the wilderness last year, the only one on just Stefanski know how to call plays. I was the only one on that island last year. I was giving him crap since week 3. Jeremy thought I was crazy. I was the only one. I don't even think he's the biggest problem. The biggest problem with the Browns right now, John, is culture. We do not have a healthy culture, a winning culture, and everyone in the organization is to blame for that, because that falls on the quarterback, that falls on the coaches. And to see the kind of adversity and the issues, like it's not normal football team adversity. It's not normal for players, parents to social media, tweet out players. It's not normal for players' wives to get so involved in what's going on. That speaks to a deeper issue than whatever products on the field. And it's concerning. And I don't know how that gets fixed.
So first off, I got to give you props. If that's how you felt last year about Stefanski while he won Coach of the Year,
it was. And it's on record. I also,
where's your crystal ball, man? I need to see
my own horn. We had Ken Carmen on, and we did a pre-draft show. I said we were going to draft Baker. Ken and Jeremy almost laughed me off the pod, but we drafted Baker. I also, John, was the first one to say, Jeremy, is Baker out of shape? John, I had never heard that at all. And I also said that we're going to get Tyrod. There is a history of me like having these like revelations. Started with Tyrod Taylor, and that was in week 8 of before he was free. I was like, no, he's going to be our next quarterback. And then we got him. Drafting Baker overweight. And last year, it was after. So I was like, why? It started week 1. Why would Stefanski do a fake punt in Baltimore first? Like that was absurd. And then the way that he called the Cowboys game, I was blown away at that OBJ reverse that I thought was the dumbest high risk, high reward play ever. And he just got really, really lucky last year. I couldn't believe it. Jeremy thought I was crazy.
So
Cameron. But yeah, I don't even think he's the biggest problem. I think the culture of the team is the biggest issue facing the Browns that I don't know how that gets fixed.
So before we get into that, I have one question for you.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully you have your crystal ball in front of you, because I need to know what you see, what's going to happen, 3, 6, 9 months from now. Draft, quarterback, free agency, lottery numbers.
Right.
That's a great track record, man. That's pretty good. I got to give you props on that.
I don't know how or when. It's just I get these feelings. It doesn't always happen. But I also think Baker's going to be our starting quarterback week 1 next year.
What you do or you don't think?
I do.
You do. Okay.
I do.
I had an NFL scout tell me the night of the Browns drafting Baker Mayfield that it was a bit of a reach. And that at the time, the scout also said the person that would have been fit better for the Browns would have been either a mixture of Josh Allen or Sam Darnold. He's 50-50 on that, right? Because Josh Allen clearly is the better one and Sam Darnold has fizzled. So
Sam
it's funny.
Darnold, by the way, has more interceptions per throws than Baker Mayfield. It's just he hasn't played in as many games. But Darnold still has the most interceptions per pass, I think, since 2018. Because we've seen that a lot of the past couple of days. Baker's done the most interceptions since
he got drafted. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you look at interceptions per pass, Darnold still's at the top because
true. And I actually tweeted that stat out last
Was that
night.
you? I knew I saw that
somewhere. Yep, that was me.
Okay.
But not the pass attempt part that you're saying, because you're right. I didn't go that in depth on my tweet, but yeah, Baker has thrown more picks since he was drafted in 28 than it was Darnold.
Winston's in the list. Baker.
Winston, who was third? I'd have to pull it up. Jared Goff. I just remembered it was Jared Goff is number 3. And I knew a lot of Winston because I covered the guy 5 years here in Tampa, in which I think there are some eerily similar mannerisms to their, not character, but to their leadership and to their style of play that's very eerily similar, which is not very good.
What does Winston need? The 30 touchdown, 30 interception club, the only 30, 30 and 30, which is just insane.
What doomed him here in Tampa was obviously lack of wins, but also the lack of wins and the interceptions. But his leadership fell on deaf ears his last 2 years, especially in his last year. All his pregame talks he lost the locker room. Whatever. Eat the W or whatever. I get the sense that's happening now in Cleveland. I get the sense that's happening with Baker. I think the message of his leadership and just what he says is falling on deaf ears there. And I think you're seeing it. I think you're seeing it because people aren't buying into it. And yes, he's injured and we can dissect him all we want. But I just don't see the fight in the offense like you saw this time last year. Right. And that's not also on him, though, too. That's Stefanski. Now, to answer your original question is what's wrong with the Browns? You say culture, and you're 100% right. So how do you fix that? Well, you look at the very top and it's ownership. I've been on record in other interviews that I've done over the last 5 years that the Browns will never be good, consistently good, unless one of two things happen. One, the Haslam sell the team. That's not going to happen.
Nope.
2, they need to stop meddling in the Browns' day-to-day operations because the, hand-picking draft picks, meddling in day-to-day things with GMs and coaches of the past. I had someone tell me that works in Berea, one of the big reasons why the Browns were so successful last year was because of COVID. Because the team was ultra focused. They're focused on a lot of reasons. They came to the practice and they went home. They didn't go out. Everything was so tight knit because of COVID testing and everything. You didn't have a social life. You're sitting at home and you go to work. Rinse and repeat. And the other factor was that the Haslams weren't always there in Berea. They couldn't be, and neither were some of the management at the time. So that was a big reason why they were so good last year. I mean, that's what I had heard from someone that works in that building, among other things, reasons why. But those are the two big differences this past year. Going off on that, I like the Haslams a lot. I think they're great owners. They do a lot for the community. They're great people. I think their heart's in the right place. I think they've learned and had been humbled some of their looking back on bad decisions. And the only way you learn is you just learn from your mistakes. You can say that about anything in your life, in your career, in your personal life, whatever. And I think they've learned that. And I think they're learning not to meddle in the business. But I also think they need to set that culture. And I think they're trying to do that. I just don't think it's happened yet for a number of reasons. I think the Stefanski hire was supposed to be that culture. And unfortunately, this year, it hasn't been. And there is internal struggles there in that locker room. And there is internal struggles there with Baker and Stefanski that needs to be ironed out. And players see it. The OBJ stuff, that is a dead giveaway of some of that stuff. Now, you don't want to place the percentage faults on OBJ, Baker, and Stefanski. That's a whole different conversation. We don't want to waste time on that. But my point is the culture aspect of things can really be assigned to ownership, and then how they can delegate day-to-day stuff with, Andrew Barry and, the GMs, coaching staff or whatever. It's all a trickle-down effect. And all you need is one bad year to screw everything up. Is it salvageable? Can they fix it? I think they can. I think Stefanski will. I don't think he's getting fired, and he shouldn't be fired.
No,
he won't be fired.
I don't think he should lose his job.
No, he won't.
I also don't think Baker should lose his job.
I'm kind of agreeing with you on that. I'm a big critique of him because of his play. Yeah, he's injured. I get it. But there's some decision making, and people have been on me on Twitter about it, but just think about it. There's some decisions that he has made that go beyond his injuries. And, his shoulder's bothering it. It's hurting his throws, underthrow. Yeah, I get that. But you're also missing wide open guys right in front of you that has nothing to do with throwing a downfield pass. There was a play that TJ Watt sacked him yesterday, that he had 3 guys completely wide open, and he held on the ball way too long. Why? Because his confidence is shattered. He doesn't trust in himself. He doesn't trust in himself because his mental makeup is weak right now, and he's hurt.
So I know the player you're talking about, because I saw a still image of the scene where it was like this play resulted in a sack, and you can see the 3 people open. But if you watch that play in real time, Baker can't see over his right guard.
No,
so he can't see 2 of them. That's to his right. He sees a guy on the left. Minka's hovering. Like, it's not, and this is the same with like basketball too. You stop any frame, you're like, oh my gosh, this person's wide open. Like, football is the worst at that, because it's just everything happens. Bam, 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 bam. You have 2 seconds to make decisions. So yes, there was a decision to be made. He didn't make it, but I don't think it's as like cut and dry as I think. His confidence level is shot. I think you're right. I think his height is a concern. I think his inability to find passing lanes or to, get the ball out cleanly needs to be addressed. And I don't think we can discredit Alex Van Pelt's comments last week saying that he knows Baker's injured and knows that it's affecting his mechanics or his footwork. It's just fascinating to know like where he stands. What is Stefanski thinking with that? Baker's bold post-game comments about why we're going to we need help with the rookie tackle. And I'm going to be talking to my family and agent about like next week. He's not playing against the Bengals on Sunday. I don't think Joe Burrow should either. But
no, he shouldn't.
But one last thing. It was a terrible show. Can we talk about the final Browns drive, John?
Yeah, but one thing real quick here about that point and that picture you were talking about, that screenshot, and you're right. There have been other instances though in that game and in games past where he has passed up guys. And if anybody's going to say, well, he's too short, he's not going to be able to see him, don't give me that garbage, because there are short quarterbacks that had that same issue. Drew Brees, Russell Wilson, whatever. It has nothing to do with his height. It's a combination of a lot of different things. It's the offensive line, the pocket collapsing too much. It's a combination of him not maybe being mobile, or him double clutching and not getting the ball out too quick enough before the guys are standing, whatever. So there's a lot of different things there. That particular play we were just talking about, you're right about. It's just, I think there's a lot of, that's one example of his decision-making that I think has been a big issue that may not necessarily be related to his injuries. Cause I think his confidence is shattered, and I think he's seeing ghosts there on the field a lot of time, because those plays were being made this time last year. So he didn't shrink, but, and so,
well, I was talking to Holly, we were tweeting last night after the game. And this is, because I'm pro Baker. I like Baker. I like that he's the quarterback for the Browns. And a lot of people on Press Play, on P3 are very hard on Baker. I mean, it's not just Orange is Oranger, Ray Guy and Rhoda, they're pretty honest and blunt about Baker. I don't have a problem saying that Baker hasn't played well. I admit that. I admit that his decision-making needs to be better. I admit that his plays cost us some wins. But what we saw in that final drive was a coach who was on tilt, who was willing to feed an injured quarterback to the wolves. You don't give up in the NFL. You keep playing. I understand that. But I saw receivers that weren't running complete routes. I saw a line that wasn't giving their all. They were getting dominated all game. Hayward was just doing whatever he wanted. Watt never stopped. But that last drive, Baker, who is hobbled with injuries, ankle, whatever, knee, whatever, shoulder that is hanging on by a partial muscle, scrambles, doesn't avoid contact, jukes the snot out of one of the Steelers defenders that should be on replay, just like Chubb Stiffarm. It was a pretty insane juke. And then,
so much for that hurt foot, right?
And then, I mean, no more objection is overruled. And then on the next 3rd and long, lowers his shoulder and plows into a defender. It looked like he was taking out seasons worth of frustration on that final drive. I could sense the frustration. His throw to Landry or Higgins that drew the pass interference on 3rd or 4th down, Landry gave up on that route. And it just seemed like no one cared except for Baker. Whether there were whether that's true, whether it was that drive more than anything made me sick, because that was a perfect encapsulation of the culture of the team, of a quarterback who no one's ever questioned his fight or his toughness, but like, why can't we get this figured out? And why did it seem like he was the only one who cared in that moment in a game that wasn't out of reach yet? It was fascinating.
It was fascinating. And it's funny you bring up Landry. I think he gave up on that route too, which is so uncharacteristic for him. But, I think he's a different guy right now. Not to get off topic real quick, but my 2 cents, Landry has not spoken to the media since the OBJ trade, and don't think that's not by design. I mean, but here's my thing, man. I'm a big Landry guy. I think he's a great leader. I think his leadership maybe has also fallen on deaf ears just a little bit too. I think if he's still upset about it, he needs to get over it. I mean, do your obligations to the media and do it. And, your buddy's gone. I know you're beat up and you're playing hurt. Everyone's playing hurt. Baker's playing hurt. Miles is playing hurt. Who isn't hurt this late in the year? So I respect him as a player, as a guy. I just like to see a little bit more out of him. I don't think he's coming back next year. That's my hot take. I think the Browns cut him in March. I think that's a lot of money.
Stefanski not naming captains was a big deal.
Yeah, I saw your tweet about that a couple weeks ago, and I think it's interesting. I think it's twofold. I think people in the locker room know who's the leader and who's not a leader. They don't need the C on the chest to know that.
Just a letter.
It's just a letter. It's just a letter. Whoop-de-doo. I mean, football and hockey are the only sports that do that, really. Baseball kind of, certain teams, whatever. Basketball, I don't think anybody really does that now, actually. But
they tried a couple years.
They did, yeah. It didn't work. But anyways, I digress. But at the same time, I think it may have, and this is not an indictment on Stefanski. It could be an indictment on the immaturity of the locker room. It could have bothered players that they didn't have that, self glow, or I should be honored this way or whatever. I don't know that for I don't know that for a fact. I'm just speculating.
No, I don't either.
It could have been that way. I know just from covering the Buccaneers for 7 years, there were guys in that locker room that were upset that they weren't captains, and there were guys maybe not necessarily upset that they weren't named, but upset that other guys weren't named, and that held a grudge for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And is that immature? Of course it is. Do you need to get over it? Yes. Did those guys get over it? Of course they did. Did it hurt them later in the year? No. Maybe for the first few weeks of the preseason, regular season, but it's a big boy sport, man. Like, build a bridge and get over it. So I don't know if it really hurt the Browns that much, to be honest with you. I think it could have divided some guys, but they probably got over it and forgot about it. I struggle with when you see these guys and people, casual fans, Chase, don't realize this now, but like the availability, and I'm not covering this team on day to day. I mean, I will be next year, but like, just talking with media members in Cleveland, but this is a different ball game for media covering these players because of COVID. So you're not in the locker room talking to guys. That's a big deal because you're stuck on Zoom like we are right now talking. If you noticed in the last 2 years on a national and local level, the amount of lack of little breaking news stories when it comes to specific teams, it's plummeted. Because these reporters, we don't have the intimate relationship with these players because we're on it in front of the screen and not in the locker room. The beauty of being in the locker room is you get to know these players. They build trust with you. They can tell you things. It's not about finding dirt on people. Sometimes you find stories that you break that could be negative, but there's also a lot of positive stories that come from talking to people. I bring this up because had the Browns media been around some of these players this year, a lot of the questions that everyone is wondering, why have things gone wrong with the locker room and with Stefanski and with, this and that, not all of it, some of it could have been answered just by being in the locker room and talking to players. And that goes for, why is Landry not talking to the media right now? Or, how is Baker's really, how's he really doing? Or, what does Myles Garrett really have to feel? Because these guys are not really going to give you much on a Zoom call. They're not. I'm telling you right now. If you're in person, one-on-one with a camera or without a camera, just talking, they're going to give you a lot more. So there's so many questions as Browns fans that are frustrated right now. You listen to any talk radio, listen to any sports, local TV, cable TV, you name it, podcast, whatever. We don't have answers to because we don't necessarily have the answers to these questions because it's not available to us. It is a different time. So the fact that COVID's still going on and is limiting our as media's ability to find some of these things out, but also trying to piece together what went wrong has been a big factor that I think we're all forgetting.
I agree with you. I think it is salvageable. I think, John, I trust Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski to figure it out.
I do too.
I trust the Browns roster, even currently. I know it doesn't matter because season is essentially over. We're out of the playoffs.
Right.
I trust our roster to be better next year. If Stefanski and Baker figure it out, if they have hard conversations, if they put forth.
But Chase, they need those hard conversations. They need those.
They will be better. The team will be better than the Browns moving on from Baker and just not fixing it.
Yeah,
that's my opinion.
I agree with you, man. I do, because I think the biggest thing, it doesn't matter what you're doing in life, the best thing to do is hash everything out. You sit down and you talk about it. And to be honest, we don't know if they haven't done that already. They may have, throughout the year, but they need to have a come to Jesus meeting soon to figure this out. And I think it's salvageable. I trust Andrew Berry and I trust Stefanski. He's coming off a coach of the year last year. I know it's a what's for you doing for me lately league. And so, yeah, he's had a horrible season, a big disappointment for the team. And as a coach who made a ton of mistakes, so many mistakes, he is, facing a lot of this blame. But I think these guys can maybe get it together. But I will say this, though. The spotlight next year is going to be on Stefanski, because if the Browns do another disappointment and don't make the playoffs, we're going to have bigger problems this time next year. Yeah.
This is our window. This is what the roster was constructed for, is for this season and next season. And if not making the playoffs is a huge blow to the team's progress and the players' development.
The core is here. The core is there outside of, a quarterback, with taking Baker out of it. I mean, you got Chubb here. Hunt's locked up in a short-term deal. I'm curious to see what they do with Daenerys Johnson. Myles Garrett's going to be here. They're probably going to lock up Denzel Ward. Austin Hooper's a guy that probably should not be back.
Agreed. And keep Clowney.
They got to re-sign Clowney if they can get him at the right price. The offensive line is there. David Njoku, re-sign him. I'd like Landry to come back. I don't know if he will. I think they could cut him. I think that they cut him, they don't get any dead money in the cap. I don't have his figures in front of me, but I believe they could cut bait with him. Although I would like him for the leadership, but I think there's a lot of questions and a lot of things need to be aired on his side. The secondary seems to be decent now. Denzel Ward's coming off a huge year. There's some
classic
depth
contract year right there for them.
Classic. Yeah, exactly. Right. There's depth issues at a lot of positions that they can go with. They're going to draft a wide receiver in the first round. I firmly believe that they should. At least Garrett Wilson should be their guy. As we record this on January 4th, a lot can change before the pro days and combine. But the window's there, dude. I mean,
it is.
The Baker should be back next year. All these fans clamoring for Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, just need to get their head out of the sky. That's not happening. Deshaun Watson doesn't want to come to Cleveland. He has a no trade clause. The Browns are not on his list of teams. Now, of course, someone could try to change his mind, but as it sits today, he is not on that list, and you don't know what they're going to want for him, and you don't know his legal issues. You aren't going to draft a quarterback mid.
I'm going to go on record. Right? I do not want Deshaun Watson as our quarterback.
In terms of skill, I would take him over Baker. I would. In terms of character and leadership,
I'm not going to explain my decision. I'm not going to explain my.
No, it's fine. But in terms of character and leadership, I would say no. Skill, I think he's a massive upgrade, in my opinion. Everything else, totally fair game.
Do not want to invite that hurricane and whatever surrounds that into.
Right. And that's fair. And I tend to agree. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. You're not going to draft a quarterback in the middle of the first round in the teens because it's a weak draft. You think they're going to find someone there? You're better off taking a wide receiver.
I'll say this. Baker's lost to Watson. Well, he lost to Watson his rookie year in Houston. Yeah. He got thrashed. And then last year they hung. It was like a crazy weather game and the Browns hung on. There have been two quarterbacks, and I've watched almost every Browns game. I'm not like Jeremy. I don't go to every Browns game, but I genuinely watch almost every Browns game. There are two quarterbacks that I've seen when they throw a ball have been like, holy crap, that was impressive. One was Sam Bradford. And you can laugh all you want, but like when that dude was healthy and could throw, it was I thought it was beautiful. And the way that I saw Deshaun Watson throw football last year in Cleveland in the fourth quarter and snow, sleet, rain, whatever it was, I was thoroughly impressed.
Yeah.
But I digress now.
Well, let me ask you this, just as we play this little hypothetical game real quick here, Chase.
Yeah.
We just laid out some guys that people want that aren't likely going to be available. There's no other really person out there that the Browns could potentially get. Jimmy Garoppolo has been floated around. Mm-hmm.
Kirk Cousins would be the one I would say to probably watch.
But that's basically a little better Case Keenum, is he not? I mean, I think that's a hard sell for the fan base if you bring in Kirk Cousins.
I would just Baker 5th year. Let's see what you got.
Yeah, I agree. I think here's the deal. You take that 5th year, you roll with it. You don't give him a contract unless the Browns make a deep run the playoffs and he plays 100% better.
Mm-hmm.
And if he doesn't, you leave.
The Kirk Cousins would be a Hail Mary for Stefanski and Barry with this current roster set up for run next year. Very little learning curve with him to maximize the roster they have now. If they're really looking at this is the final year of whatever window that our roster is constructed right now, and they are sold that it cannot happen with Baker, that would be what I could see them doing without missing any beat and being able to just continue to roll would be with him, just because of their relationship, their history together.
It makes sense. It does. I think it's a hard sell for the fans.
Sure. Well,
maybe for the locker room too, but who knows?
I think the fans are so. I don't even know would it be a hard sell? You think?
I think Case Keenum is maybe a few notches below Kirk Cousins, in my opinion. Kirk Cousins is one of the most overpaid quarterbacks in the history of the NFL, who has not had the production that you think he should have, especially with the weapons that he had out there in Minnesota.
Every year in like the end of September, they're like, Kirk Cousins, MVP stats, here we go. And then it's like no one ever mentions it again. I'm just saying, if I get like and maybe my head's a crystal ball now, John. I don't know. I don't know what happened there.
Well, let's document this here on January 4th, 2022. Jay Smith calling for Kirk Cousins to be the Browns quarterback.
I have said I think Baker's going to be the.
Yeah, that's true.
That's my prediction. That, yeah. But if if they were to make a move, I could see them doing that.
Here's the other thing too that we're not talking about. We haven't brought up. Does Baker want to come back? I mean, there's all these internal struggles, drama with him and Stefanski and some players. That locker room was divided with the OBJ trade. I can tell you that 100%. I think maybe those guys may be over it by now, but does he want to come back and deal with this? I mean, here's the thing. Yes, he's tough. He's admirable job of coming out there and playing hurt, but after that performance against the Steelers, you have a coach of putting him out there and having, who was it, Hudson on the end that couldn't, block couldn't handle TJ Watt, couldn't do anything. I mean, those type of decision makings that by Stefanski can causing Baker to get a little upset, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's just one example.
Yeah.
Would he want to come back? I mean, I would think he would.
I don't know. I hope it's all of these unknowns. I do trust Andrew Berry, and I do trust Kevin Stefanski to make the right decisions leading up to the kickoff of whatever game there is. The Browns are you never have to worry about content or anything to talk about with podcasting or with news, John, which is just
you don't
the greatest gift of all. It's like the Jelly of the Month Club. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Man, 'tis the season. You know what's funny? I tweeted this last night or this morning. The Browns are the best in the NFL at one thing. You know what that is, Chase?
It's stuff that I don't like. It's
right. It's dysfunction.
It's the worst.
And it's unfortunate. And it comes back to your original question that you posed to me about how do you change the culture? And you need the right people in place.
It takes hard work. It takes hard work. It takes hard conversations, and it takes the relationship equity and the trust of each other that you want what's best for each other. And if they don't have hard conversations this offseason, it's not going to happen. The way to fix it is winning. Winning doesn't fix it. Winning brushes it under the rug. And if you win enough, then the dust settles and all of a sudden there's no lump. But that doesn't happen in Cleveland. And when you have a culture like Tennessee or like Buffalo or even New England, the Patriot way or whatever, you had players get upset last year, but you don't hear any of this crap happening in Buffalo and Tennessee in New England. You don't, at least I'm not in on like Titans Twitter or whatever.
Sure.
Anything. I don't even know if Titans fans have Titans Twitter. They can't even tell how whatever I love the Titans. I'm not trying to crap on the Titans, but I'm just saying no, I don't see this happening anywhere else. My goodness. The only closest team is Tampa Bay, and they've invited that, John, just the past couple years, right?
But, well, the Buccaneers have been a complete change, and they've had a lot of luck on their side by getting Tom Brady, because I mean, that's a whole different conversation. That came out of complete nowhere.
Maybe the Raiders with their dysfunction.
I was just going to say the Raiders this year is probably, unfortunately with the off the field issues there, worse, but
they just had another player, I think, get arrested.
There's always been issues in the years past with teams with the Raiders, with players there. Cowboys too has always had some dysfunction. It's crazy, and this is really, it pains me to say this, and it's going to pain you to agree with me on this. The three franchises that you rarely hear about dysfunction:
Steelers, Baltimore, and New England.
Bingo, bingo, bingo. Yep.
I didn't mention Baltimore and Pittsburgh because I refuse to acknowledge that it's true.
Yeah, I mean, those are three teams I can't stand the most in the NFL. And
I think what Vrabel's built in Tennessee, I think that what he's done this year and what the past couple years, honestly, is just straight like Tennessee culture and like set by Vrabel. I mean,
yeah, I'm a big Vrabel guy. I do like him a lot.
Yeah, their record now without Henry and Jones and AJ Brown to still pretty much have the one. That's culture, man.
That is culture, yeah.
So they've got to fix it. I hope they fix it the hard way, which is working it out with Baker. I hope they don't try to fix it the easy way by moving on from Baker. Let
me ask you this. After that dismal, awful, horrendous, whatever you want to say, performance in Pittsburgh by Baker Mayfield and also performance by Kevin Stefanski in terms of coaching, did your opinion sway one way or the other after that game? Because for a lot of people, it swayed way worse against both guys, meaning the percentage of Baker returning dropped after that game.
No, I felt like our culture, I did not expect to win that game.
No, I didn't either. But I mean, you also want to win or lose in a better way. I'm not one for moral victories, but you want to perform a little better than, having your quarterback sacked 9 times. And
I've seen the Browns lose some pretty bad ways. I don't even think that was the worst way that.
No, you're right. And I will say this. I was at the game a couple years ago. It was a Thursday night or Monday night when the Ravens won on that field goal. And the Browns missed a field goal and the Ravens returned it for the touchdown to win. I was at the game. I filmed it on my phone.
Was that the block that Ed Reed?
Or the block, yeah, whatever it was.
Okay.
Block, missed, whatever. It was returned. I don't know. I was in the stands in the dog pound sitting there watching that thing unravel. That's a way to lose a game, man. That is one way to lose that you don't want to lose.
Yeah. I think what makes this hard is they haven't played like this in so long. That this wasn't like a team we watched last year and really any this year. Like we wanted to be better and be past this iteration, this version of the Browns that we were all sick of being made fun of, that we were sick of watching and paying money for. Like we didn't want to see this again. And we were promised that it wouldn't be that way again. And there it was, for whatever reason, whoever's fault. So my opinion wasn't really swayed worse. It just assured that it's a deep-rooted issue that I'm concerned about how they're going to try to fix it.
Baker's done. He's going to have surgery on that shoulder soon. The question is, for a lot of people, was that the last game that you'll see him in a Browns uniform? I say no, he'll play again. You say no, he'll play again. And I think that's the right move. But they need to figure some other things out too. They need to, talk everything out, be men about it, and air your grievances. But I'm more interested, Chase, not so much if Baker's coming back or not, or them getting on the same page. I'm more interested to the moves that Barry makes in terms of this roster. I know we just talked on it a little bit, but what is he going to do with some of these guys? Who is he going to cut? Who's he going to, bring in? Are they going to make any trades? Who are they going to do in the draft? I'm more interested in that part, because the off-season roster moves in sports always intrigues me. More so, I think, on the baseball level than on the football level. But the football level is more challenging because you have a hard cap, and money's not guaranteed. So it's a little bit. It's also very not to struggle, but it's just harder to configure your money and configure your roster and everything. So there's a lot that goes into it. I find that very interesting. I want to know what he tries to do this year. I don't think he's a guy that's going to panic on any moves,
right?
But I do see him as a guy who's going to make some calculated decisions, but also look at guys that have been staples on this team and not be shy away of letting them go either. The important thing is that offensive line is set. So that's a big plus going forward. Whereas that's the biggest question for a lot of teams in the NFL outside of quarterback is, their line. So I know they didn't play as well as they did last year, but it's, for a number of reasons, COVID, injuries, and what have you. But I think that's big for them next year.
Yeah. John, dude, we could talk Browns all night. We haven't even talked about the Cavs, and I don't want to take a ton of time because, bro, we host a pod, not together, but we host the same pod every week. If you like hearing John talk and tolerate me, John and I host with Sam Amico, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. John and I alternate weeks, and it is just a delight, John, to watch this young Cavs team come into their own. They took a tough one on the chin tonight against the Grizzlies. John Morant's a super duper star, and he had an incredible end of game sequence. Just one of the top finishers around the rim, one of the just like top athletes, like who can jump out of the gym, won them the game, honestly, after Garland had a really impressive drive. It was just an incredible last final sequences. I could watch these two play in the playoffs, man. And I know that would take a lot to happen, but that would be an awesome series. And I know that's like complete like dreamland, but
well, it's a dreamland because the Grizzlies are in the West. So the only time that would happen is if they were in the NBA Finals. But that would be phenomenal series to watch because you have two young teams, you have two young point guards. John Morant is easily a top 5 under the age of 24 player in the league, I think.
I think if you asked a lot of people, give me a player you would like want to start your franchise around, he would be some people's answers.
Yeah, I agree. I think he would be there. I think Trae Young would definitely be there. You know who wouldn't be there anymore is Zion Williamson.
Yep.
Who I was on record before he was even drafted that he was going to be a bust because his injuries and his weight.
Yeah, I would take Ja over Luka.
Yeah, and talk about another guy who's struggling with his weight this year.
I would take Ja over Trae. I like what Ja offers. I
would take John Morant for sure. You know who I also would love to take? Who's I wouldn't say over John Morant, but I think he's gotten lost because of the injury is Jamal Murray in Denver.
Yeah, Denver.
You know,
he has such a good bubble. He has such a great a display, like a full on. Oh, the Jamal Murray's here. Like you can see it coming. The bubble was like, oh, Jamal Murray.
It's funny. Luka, I think, has taken a step back this year. I don't know what his deal is. His play has not been there.
Did you read the Luka Carlisle expose?
No, I heard about it though.
Mm.
Yeah,
it was interesting.
Donovan Mitchell would be another one for me.
Dude, I just really like Ja Morant. I would take Ja over Mitchell, even though Mitchell has playoff experience. And I don't know. I think a lot of times in the NBA it comes down to who's the best player on the court.
Yeah, that's fair.
And Ja Morant, I think, is in the conversation every time he steps on the court to be the best.
Let me throw someone at you. And Sam Amico, who is our co-host on the pod.
What up, Sam?
Sam, where you at, man?
Sam, come on.
Sam Amico from Hoops Wire. Follow him at Amico Hoops. Shameless plug, Sam. You owe us. He's a big Jason Tatum guy.
Yeah.
And I love Jason Tatum's game. I know he's a little older, different type of player, but I think he gets a little overlooked. I think he'd be right up there too for a guy that you want to build around.
Yeah. Tried and
it didn't. And Sam has been on record by saying, look at that team here as they approach that trade deadline as a team, the Celtics as a team that could potentially move one of those guys, probably more so Jaylen Brown than Tatum if it happens.
Imagine Jaylen at R3. I mean,
Cavs need
to take a cold shower, man.
Chase, Cavs need a wing though. They need a wing bad. They need depth with all these injuries now. The Rondo move was nice. He's not going to be a Rubio. You need a veteran guard with experience. Teams aren't making any big trades now because of COVID protocols. Their hands are tied. There are players that are being picked up on NBA teams that shouldn't even be in the league right now. That's how bad it is in terms of finding anybody. So it gives credit to the Cavs at getting someone for Rondo for basically nothing in Denzel Valentine, who hasn't done anything really for the Cavs this year. But they need, at some point, hopefully the COVID variant Omicron will drop here, and the NBA can kind of get back to normal in time for next month's trade deadline, because the Cavs need to make another move. I think for their wing depth, because you get a game like this against the Grizzlies where they lose by 4, that extra player, the extra experience, the extra scoring will make a big difference.
Okoro being out, you felt that tonight.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know if you stop, but I think it's another body to throw it at Ja. Here's why I'm not as concerned about finding a wing, because every game, John, Darius Garland and Evan Mobley improve. And I think Mobley would be another name that, if not the first, maybe like, if we're doing a snake draft of players on a team, you're going to see Evan Mobley in the second round of this hypothetical franchise redraft of young players. Mobley is going to be there. And I think with his continued development and Darius Garland's blossoming, I think we're going to be okay. And I know you agree.
I do. And here's the thing: the Cavs are. I think, is it safe to say? Can we say they're going to make the playoffs now?
We're 5 before the loss. We were 5th seed. I think we are.
Like, can you and I and our listeners I don't want to say guarantee, but for the sake of conversation,
I've talked about it for the past month on Cavs in the Breaks.
Yeah, so have I. Okay, so all right, so we're on the same boat here. So we're going to say the Cavs are going to make the playoffs. Okay, that's great, and then that's not including play-in. So they're going to probably be a 5, 6, 7 seed. Okay, so if that's the goal, that's great. Mm-hmm. And let's just say they go and they lose in the first round. Okay, so the next year, what's fascinating to me is, and this is a shameless plug for my podcast with my brother Scott, Sabol Brothers in the Baseline. When we had Mike Fratello on, we had a 2-part interview with him. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to any of it.
Which, by the way, you've also had Sean Kemp on your podcast.
Yeah.
Which you guys are just killing it, by the way.
Yeah. Sean was a phenomenal man. That was a fun interview. A phenomenal dude. And told us some great Cavs stories. I know he was only in Cleveland for 3 years, but also great Jordan stories and old Richfield Coliseum stories, and genuinely nice guy. But Fratello brought up a point to us. This was before we recorded and a little bit while we recorded. It's one thing for a team in the NBA to be a 1, a 2, and a 3 seed, and then be a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seed or whatever. It's hard for you to get in that top 3. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying the Cavs we're probably a year or 2 away from even sniffing that area, but it's just something to keep in your mind, because teams that are getting that 4, 5, 6 range, kind of like the Cavs of the late 90s, a little bit, some of Fratello's years, never are able to break that top 3, because the top 3 teams are the ones that are always going to be the big threat to go to the finals.
But listen, to get into the top 3 teams, you have to have a best player on the court.
Yeah, you do.
And Mobley gives us that possibility, John. Mobley gives us that ceiling of a top 1, 2, 3 team. Sorry, I'm all fired up.
You just took the words right out of my mouth. He should be that guy.
Yes, 100%.
Maybe not this year. Maybe not this year, though. Next year, year after, whatever.
Maybe next year. If he continues to grow, I don't think that is out of the realm of possibility. The Nets are old.
Yeah, they're older. Yeah, I mean the Bucks are still going to be around there, but and one team we haven't talked about, and I know Sam and I haven't talked about it when we've recorded our podcast, but the Chicago Bulls resurgence right now is absolutely through the roof. It's unreal.
Also, but I don't know if I was on record calling their incredible year this year, but I loved every move they made in the offseason. And if betting was legal in Ohio, I would have bet the over of the wins. I
It's coming though. The betting is coming.
Yeah,
it's coming. But when you're real quick, back to when I finish my point, when you're a team that's stuck in that 4, 5, 6 seed, when you don't have that player potentially like a Mobley, you get stuck. You know who you are? You're the Indiana Pacers. Okay. You are the Cavs kind of the late 90s, you know,
the Hornets.
You were the Hornets of the late 90s too. You were the New Jersey Nets of the mid 2000s. You know, you had good players, Jason Kidd, Vince Carter, Richard, whoever. You could name a bunch of different teams and you don't get anywhere. So it's just something to think about when just because you make the playoffs isn't the end all be all goal for the first year. It's the next following years, because there's been some great Cavs teams back in the day that weren't able to become that 1 or 2, 3 seed because of Michael Jordan, but or not just Cavs teams, but other NBA teams. So as we talk and we look forward as this young Cavs team continues to grow and play in this season, and we want to look what the future is going to hold with this young budding team of Garland and Mobley and Allen. It's just something to think about.
Well, John, here in the next couple of weeks, we all need to do a 3-person Cavs on the Break pod. You know, it's a top 100 NBA podcast on Apple Pods. It is.
I saw that, man. Yeah, you posted that.
I just got another alert that we were in the top 100 again.
Very cool. Yeah, so, you built this thing, man. I'm just happy and honored to be a part of it. So thank you for letting me come on board.
People like you, man. It's great. And John, just thank you so much for coming on the Chase Smith podcast. And thank you all so much for downloading and listening. Shouts to the Press Play Podcast Network for making this possible. Follow us online at Press Play Pods. Visit our website, pressplaypodcast.com, to keep up with all of our shows and network news. John, plug something, man. Where can we listen to the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline? Where can we find you on Twitter? When are we going to see that face on Fox 8 News in Cleveland? Tell us all the deets, man.
Yeah, man. So my brother Scott and I both have a podcast right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. It's called the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline. We talk Cleveland sports with a brother's perspective, but we also take a history to the Cleveland sports angle with former players and historical figures. So check that out. We've had some great guests. Chase just named a few as well. And, you can follow me at John_Sabol. I tweet a lot about Cleveland sports. You name it, we talk about it. And then I don't know when I'll be making my on-air debut at Fox 8 News in Cleveland, but it's going to happen in February. My first day is February 8th, but I don't know if I'll be on then. I don't think I will be. But once I kind of get, move out of here in sunny, warm Florida to get the cold, snowy Ohio here at the end of the month, early February. And once I get my schedule, I'll let you know, Chase, when you can watch. But yeah, man, it's exciting to get back in town, get back home closer to friends and family, get back to the city that I know and the teams that I love covering and rooting for, and the station that I grew up watching. It's an honor to be a part of, that team, and honor to be part of Press Play Podcast too, man, and letting me help out with Cavs and the Break NBA podcast, and letting my brother and I do our own thing as well. So I appreciate that, and thanks for having me on today, buddy.
Of course, man. You guys are great. John, love it. We'll be in touch, and thank you again.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.